A veteran and his dog bought a $100 mountain estate. What they found shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Jack knew that buying property was risky, especially when it was something like this, a mountain estate listed for just $100. In all his years of service, Jack had learned that sometimes the best opportunities came from the most unlikely places. A retired Army veteran, he had lived through enough uncertainty and hardship to know that you didn't look a gift horse in the mouth, especially when it could be your last chance to find peace. After years of being on the move, and without much to show for it, this small piece of land seemed like the break he had been waiting for. He wasn't expecting much, just a small, quiet place to settle with his loyal companion, Duke, a German shepherd who had been by his side for nearly as long as he could remember. They had both seen the worst of the world. The old estate was exactly what he needed, a place where he and Duke could live quietly without the ghosts of war haunting them. The property was tucked away in the mountains, a place so far removed from the world that it felt like time had forgotten it. The listing had been vague, almost too good to be true. Mountain estate, great for a retreat, only $100. There was something about the location that spoke to Jack. A hidden gem in the mountains, it was far enough from civilization to offer peace, but close enough to a small town for supplies. He could already picture the two of them, walking the winding trails, living the quiet life he had always dreamed of. When they arrived at the property, the first thing Jack noticed was the silence. It was a stillness that felt alive, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. The place was covered with overgrown trees, wild vines creeping over every building, and the remnants of what looked like a once grand house now decaying into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp wood, and Jack could hear the faint whisper of wind through the branches. It felt like stepping into another world, a world that held its secrets close, waiting for the right person to discover them. Jack felt a strange sensation in his chest, like a tug, a whisper telling him to dig deeper, to look beyond the surface. He had no idea then, but this seemingly forgotten estate would turn out to be the key to something much bigger than either he or Duke could have imagined. Jack and Duke spent the next few days exploring their new surroundings, but the more they uncovered, the more questions began to surface. The property was covered in dense woods, and Jack could hardly make sense of the tangled mess of vines and trees. The old house, though in disrepair, stood out with its faded charm. It was a large stone building with tall, narrow windows that seemed to peer into the past. There was something eerie about it, yet oddly inviting. The house had clearly been abandoned for years, but it felt as if it was waiting for someone to return. Jack thought about how he had spent most of his life in battle, dealing with the chaos of the world, and now, after all these years, this quiet place was his chance at peace. He couldn't help but think that maybe this was meant to be. The first night, they slept in the truck, but by the next day, Jack was determined to settle in. He knew there would be hard work ahead, clearing the property and repairing the house, but he didn't mind. After all, he had nothing but time, and he had become used to doing things the hard way. Duke, ever the loyal companion, seemed to feel the same sense of duty. Jack unpacked their things, settling into the small, makeshift camp they had set up near the house. As the days passed, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this place than met the eye. On the third day, while taking a walk through the woods to clear his mind, Jack stumbled upon something that made his heart skip a beat. There, half hidden beneath a pile of fallen branches, was an old wooden chest. It was clearly out of place, buried under layers of debris, as though someone had tried to hide it away. Jack knelt down, carefully brushing away the dirt and leaves. The chest was heavy and made of thick, aged wood, with iron bands around the corners. He tried to open it, but the lock was old and rusted. It took some effort, but after a few hard tugs, the chest popped open with a creak. Inside, Jack found something that would change everything. There were stacks of old papers, some yellowed and fragile, and a small box made of polished wood. Jack pulled out the box first, intrigued by the fine craftsmanship. As he opened it, He was stunned by what he found inside. A collection of rare, ancient coins, some glinting with gold and silver, others with strange markings he didn't recognize. Along with the coins, there was a small, faded map. The map was old, likely drawn centuries ago, and it seemed to show the area surrounding the mountain estate, with specific markings in the woods and near the house. The markings on the map were unfamiliar to Jack, but they looked like coordinates or directions to something hidden. The discovery left Jack speechless. He stared at the map, running his fingers over the coins, trying to make sense of what he had just uncovered. Could this be some kind of treasure? Had someone hidden it here long ago, waiting for the right person to find it? He felt a surge of excitement mixed with a deep sense of uncertainty. What was the connection between the map, the coins, and this property? Jack knew he had to find out. The next few days were spent trying to decipher the map. He walked through the woods, comparing the landmarks to what was shown on the ancient document. The map seemed to lead him in circles, always pointing back to the old house, as if the treasure was within reach but just out of his grasp. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Jack made his way into the basement of the house, where he found something that would change everything. The basement was cold and musty, filled with old furniture and broken remnants of past lives. He had only been in the basement once before, but this time, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a narrow stone doorway hidden behind a pile of old crates. His heart raced as he approached it. This was it. The map had led him here. He pushed aside the crates, revealing a door that seemed to have been sealed for years. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, but the faint outline of a lock was visible. Jack had no idea what was behind the door, but he knew this was the key to the mystery. He had no choice but to open it. With one final push, Jack turned the old, rusty handle and pulled the door open. What lay beyond was something he could never have imagined. The room was filled with rows of shelves, each one stacked high with ancient books, scrolls, and artifacts. The air smelled stale, but there was a sense of something alive in the room, as though it had been waiting for Jack to discover it. On one of the shelves, Jack noticed a large, leather-bound book, its cover worn with age. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the dusty surface. As he opened the book, a wave of cold air seemed to wash over him. The pages were filled with strange symbols, maps, and drawings. At first, Jack couldn't make sense of it, but then he realized that the book was a journal, a record of someone's life. The more he read, the more he understood that the person who had lived here had been part of something far bigger than he could have imagined. This was no ordinary treasure. This was the legacy of a hidden civilization, and it was now in Jack's hands. As Jack continued to read the leather-bound journal, his mind raced. The journal was written in a mix of languages he didn't fully recognize, but he could make out a few words here and there. There was a recurring symbol in the drawings that seemed to match the markings on the map he had found earlier. The deeper he delved into the pages, the more he realized that this was no ordinary journal. It was a detailed account of a hidden network of treasures, artifacts, and ancient secrets that had been passed down for generations. Whoever had lived here before him had been part of something far greater than a simple mountain estate. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he pieced together the meaning of the cryptic notes. The person who had written this journal was not just a collector of treasures. They were a protector of a secret. The more Jack read, the more he felt a connection to this unknown figure, as if the person's fate was somehow intertwined with his own. The map he had found earlier wasn't just a map of the estate. It was a guide to a treasure that had been hidden away, waiting for the right person to find it. Jack knew now that he wasn't just in possession of a forgotten estate. He was standing at the threshold of something monumental. But what exactly? And why had it been hidden for so long? The journal provided some clues, but left many unanswered questions. It described a series of locations, many of which were marked with strange symbols. Some of these symbols were familiar to Jack, but others were not. He was certain, though, that the next clue was hidden somewhere on the estate. It was just a matter of finding it. That night, after studying the journal for hours, Jack decided to take Duke with him and investigate the areas mentioned in the journal. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important lurking just beyond the reach of his understanding, something that could change everything. As Jack and Duke ventured deeper into the property the next day, they stumbled upon an overgrown path leading into the woods. It was barely visible, hidden under the thick underbrush, but something about it caught Jack's attention. The air was thick with the smell of earth and pine, and the sound of distant birds chirping filled the silence around them. Jack's intuition told him to follow the path. It was narrow and winding, but with every step, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had walked this path before. Eventually, they reached a clearing, and there, standing among the trees, was an ancient stone structure that looked like a small chapel. The stones were weathered and cracked, but there was something about the place that felt alive. Jack could almost feel the energy emanating from it, like the land itself was holding its breath. He and Duke approached cautiously, but as they got closer, Jack noticed something strange. There was a faint glow coming from the entrance of the chapel, a soft light that seemed to flicker and pulse. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and it sent a shiver down his spine. Was this part of the treasure the journal had described? Or was it something more? Jack stepped forward, reaching for the door, but as his hand made contact with the stone, a sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, sending leaves spiraling into the air. Duke growled softly at his side, sensing something was wrong. The door to the chapel creaked open, revealing a dark interior that seemed to stretch far beyond the confines of the small building. Inside, Jack could barely make out a pedestal in the center, and on it, something that shimmered in the dim light. His heart raced as he stepped into the chapel, Duke close behind. The air inside was cool, almost unnaturally so, and the faint glow grew stronger with each step. Jack's eyes narrowed as he approached the pedestal. What he saw next would change his life forever. There, on the pedestal, was an object unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was a crystal, glowing with an ethereal light that seemed to pulse with an inner energy. The crystal was surrounded by intricate carvings, similar to the symbols in the journal, but this one was different. It was as if the crystal itself was alive, radiating a power that Jack could feel deep in his bones. He reached out, his hand trembling as he touched the surface of the crystal. The moment his fingers made contact, a wave of energy surged through him, and for a brief moment, Jack felt as if he was connected to something much larger than himself. It was a feeling of profound clarity, of understanding the world in a way that was beyond human comprehension. Jack stumbled back, shaken by the intensity of the experience. He looked at Duke, who was now standing at his side, eyes wide with concern. The crystal had been waiting for him, just as the journal had described, and now, everything was beginning to make sense. The treasure was not just gold or jewels, it was something far more powerful. Jack knew that what he had discovered was just the beginning. There were more secrets hidden in this estate, and it was up to him to uncover them. As he stood there, the weight of the discovery sinking in, Jack realized that his life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. What had started as a simple quest for peace had now become a journey into the unknown, one that would test everything he thought he knew about the world and his place in it. The crystal hummed faintly under Jack's touch, its ethereal glow casting strange shadows around the chapel's stone walls. His heart raced, the pulse of the energy from the crystal still reverberating through his fingers. It felt as though the earth itself was whispering to him, urging him to listen, to understand. He pulled his hand back, breathless and shaken, and took a step back, trying to process the magnitude of what he had just experienced. The room was eerily silent now, the strange hum of the crystal the only sound. Duke, ever watchful, stood by his side, his eyes scanning the room as if sensing something more than just the physical world around them. Jack took a deep breath and forced himself to steady his nerves. He had been prepared for a treasure hunt, but nothing in his wildest dreams could have prepared him for this. This crystal, this was no ordinary artifact. It was something far older, far more powerful. It wasn't just the physical object he had uncovered, but the potential it held. Could this be what the journal had spoken of? Was this the key to unlocking whatever mystery had been buried here for so long? Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement mixed with a deep, nagging fear. What if the crystal was the source of the power that had kept this estate hidden for so long? What if the same forces that had protected it in the past were still watching, waiting for someone like him to uncover it? Jack stood in the center of the room, the crystal still pulsing softly in the dim light. His mind raced through the pages of the journal he had studied so intently. He recalled the sections that spoke of protectors, guardians, and the ancient forces that had hidden the treasures of the estate. The symbols, the hidden chambers, the cryptic writings, it all began to make sense now. But what was he meant to do with it? Should he leave the estate, let it remain forgotten, as it had been for so many years? Or had the discovery of the crystal meant something more? Duke barked suddenly, snapping Jack from his thoughts. The dog's fur was bristling, and his ears were alert, scanning the shadows in the room. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Something was different. The air had shifted, the heavy silence now charged with an unsettling tension. Jack reached for the crystal again, determined to understand its power. As his fingers touched the surface, a flash of light exploded in the room, and the walls seemed to tremble with an ancient energy. Jack staggered back, his vision blurring as the light intensified, and for a split second, he saw images flashing before his eyes, visions of people, places, and events that seemed to stretch back through time. The images were fragmented, but they were unmistakably clear. He saw the figure from the journal, the protector, the one who had hidden the crystal in the first place. He saw the same symbols etched into the stone walls of the chapel, and he saw the legacy of those who had lived here before him. The vision flickered, and for a moment, Jack could almost hear their voices, faint whispers that seemed to carry through time. "You are the one," a voice said. "You are the key." The vision faded as quickly as it had come, and Jack was left standing in the dim light of the chapel, his heart pounding in his chest. The crystal was silent once again, its glow dimming to nothing. Duke whimpered softly at his side, sensing Jack's unease. Jack took a few moments to collect himself, the weight of what had just happened settling in. The vision had felt real, too real to ignore. He wasn't just on some random quest for treasure. He had been chosen for something greater. The crystal, the estate, the journal, it was all connected. But to what end? And why had it all been hidden away for so long? Jack knew that the answers lay somewhere within the estate. He had uncovered the first part of the puzzle, but there were still so many questions left unanswered. What had happened to the protector? And why had they chosen to leave such a powerful artifact behind? What did it mean for Jack and Duke? And most importantly, what would happen if the secrets of the estate were to be fully revealed? Jack stood in the chapel, his thoughts swirling. He had come here looking for a fresh start, for peace, for a life away from the chaos of the world. But now, he realized, his journey had only just begun. There were forces at play here, forces that had been at work long before he arrived. And as much as he wanted to retreat into the safety of ignorance, Jack knew he couldn't. He was already too deep. The mysteries of this mountain estate were now a part of him, and there was no turning back. Jack carefully placed the crystal back on the pedestal, the weight of his decision settling over him like a thick fog. He and Duke would uncover the rest of the secrets, one step at a time, no matter what it cost them. Jack knew that something far greater was at stake now, something that went beyond the quiet life he had envisioned for himself and Duke. As he stood in the dimly lit chapel, staring at the crystal resting on the pedestal, his thoughts raced. The vision he had seen earlier, of the protector, the symbols, the cryptic whispers, kept playing over in his mind. It felt as though the past and the present were somehow connected, as if the actions of those who had come before him were now calling him to fulfill a purpose he couldn't yet understand. His heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and dread. Jack had always known that life had a way of pulling you into unexpected journeys, but this was something entirely different. He glanced over at Duke, who sat patiently by his side, as if he too understood the weight of the discovery. The dog's amber eyes were alert, watching the surroundings, sensing the shift in the air. Jack felt a deep connection to his companion, and for the first time since arriving at the estate, he realized just how much Duke was not just a loyal friend, but also a guide. Jack's gaze turned back to the glowing crystal. He reached for it again, this time with more purpose. His fingers brushed the surface, and once again, the energy surged through him. This time, it felt different. It was as though the crystal was responding to his intent, acknowledging something inside him that he hadn't fully recognized until now. "Hey!" Soft hum filled the room, growing louder with each passing second, until it felt as if the very walls of the chapel were vibrating in tune with the crystal's energy. Jack closed his eyes, focusing on the hum. It was like a melody, ancient and familiar, one that resonated deep within him, stirring something primal. Then, Just as quickly as it had come, the hum stopped, leaving the room in an eerie silence. Jack opened his eyes, looking down at his hands, still resting on the crystal. The glow had dimmed, but a strange warmth lingered around him. Something had changed, but he couldn't tell what. He felt as if he had crossed a threshold, and whatever lay beyond it was now within reach. As the moments passed, Jack became acutely aware that this was no longer just a mystery of hidden treasures. This was something far more significant. He could feel it in his bones, the weight of the discovery settling into his chest. He was meant to uncover something far greater than gold or jewels. He was meant to unlock the secrets of this place, and possibly, to protect them. But protect them from whom? And why had it been hidden away for so long? Jack knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed answers. He turned and headed back toward the main house, Duke following closely behind. The air outside was cool, the sun setting behind the mountains, casting a soft orange glow across the landscape. The quiet of the estate seemed almost unsettling now, as though the entire place was holding its breath, waiting for something. Jack stepped inside the house, his mind spinning. He knew that the crystal was a key, but to what? He needed to find the next piece of the puzzle, the next clue that would explain all of this. He retraced his steps through the house, looking for something, anything, that might give him a clearer understanding of the estate's history. He went back to the library, where he had first found the journal. There, on the wooden table where he had left it, was the leather-bound book, open to a page that Jack hadn't fully examined. As he walked over to it, his eyes immediately caught sight of a new detail, a symbol that matched the one on the crystal. It was etched into the margins of the page, surrounded by more notes and diagrams. Jack leaned in closer, trying to decipher the text. It seemed to be a map of sorts, a more detailed version of the one he had found earlier, with additional markings and annotations. The symbols now made more sense, each one corresponding to specific locations on the estate grounds. He could see a path that led from the chapel to another part of the property, a section marked with a large X, and the words, "The Heart." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He knew then that this was no coincidence. The heart. It had to be the next step in the journey. Without wasting another moment, he grabbed the journal and made his way outside, where the night had already begun to fall. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the distant sounds of the forest filled the silence around him. He moved swiftly, his eyes scanning the darkening woods for any sign of the path the map described. As he walked deeper into the forest, Jack felt as though the estate itself was guiding him, the map and the journal working together like a compass leading him towards something he wasn't quite ready to understand. The woods grew denser, the trees taller, their branches entwining above him to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. But still, he pressed on, driven by a force he couldn't explain. Duke, as always, stayed close behind, his alert eyes scanning every movement in the shadows. They had been through so much together, but this felt different. Jack had the distinct feeling that whatever was hidden in these woods, whatever lay at the heart, was something that would change their lives forever. He could only hope that he was ready for whatever was coming next. The woods grew denser as Jack and Duke ventured further into the night. The trail had become harder to follow, but Jack's instincts were sharper than ever. The map, though faint and weathered, was still a guide, and the symbol that marked the heart kept drawing his attention. Something was pulling him forward, urging him toward this unknown destination. Jack's breath misted in the cool night air, and the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot was the only sound that accompanied their steps. Duke, ever watchful, trotted ahead, his ears alert, his nose twitching with every new scent that crossed his path. As the trees loomed higher around them, the silence of the forest was palpable, almost as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching them from the shadows. The map had shown a path, but it was only a rough estimate. Jack knew he had to trust his senses now, more than anything. The air seemed to thicken as they approached a clearing. It was almost like a pocket in the forest, a place untouched by time. Jack felt it before he saw it, the unmistakable presence of something ancient, something that had been there long before him. As they stepped into the clearing, Jack's heart skipped a beat. There, in the center of the open space, was an enormous stone structure. It was more of a monolith than a building, an imposing formation of rocks and slabs arranged in a circular pattern. The stone was weathered, covered with moss, and yet it radiated a strange energy, a silent power that seemed to hum beneath the surface. The shape was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It wasn't just a natural formation. It had been built, designed with purpose. The air around the structure felt charged, as though the very ground they stood on was alive. Jack's pulse quickened as he approached the stone circle. The closer he got, the more he could feel the energy pulsing in time with his heartbeat. It was almost as though the stones were responding to his presence, reacting to the very essence of who he was. Duke stopped at the edge of the clearing, his body stiff and alert. The dog was staring at the center of the circle, and Jack could feel the tension in the air, thickening with every passing second. The sense of being watched, of being part of something much larger than himself, was overwhelming. Jack paused at the entrance to the stone circle, taking a moment to steady himself. He didn't know what he was about to face, but he felt deep down that it was important, critical to understanding the mystery of this place. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Slowly, he stepped forward, Duke following close behind. As they entered the circle, the energy seemed to intensify. The ground beneath their feet felt warm, almost as though it was alive. Jack's eyes scanned the stones, looking for any sign of what to do next. That's when he saw it. A faint etching on one of the stones, barely visible in the dim light. The same symbol that had appeared in the journal, on the crystal, and now here, carved into the stone. It was a circle with intricate lines weaving through it, a pattern that seemed both simple and complex at the same time. Jack reached out to touch the stone, his fingers brushing over the etching. As soon as he made contact, the ground beneath him trembled, and the stone he touched began to glow with a soft, golden light. Jack stepped back in surprise, watching as the glow spread through the stone circle, lighting up the symbols on each of the stones. The energy surged again, this time in a wave that seemed to ripple through the entire clearing. The air became thick with anticipation, and Jack felt as though he was on the verge of something monumental. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The glowing stones began to shift, their positions subtly moving, and the ground before Jack split open. A deep, echoing rumble reverberated through the air, as though the earth itself was waking up. From the crack in the ground, a faint light emerged, blue, soft, and otherworldly. It was coming from below, from something hidden deep within the earth. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he stepped forward. He could feel the pull, the undeniable urge to discover what lay beneath. The light grew brighter, and the rumble continued, now accompanied by a low hum, like the heartbeat of the earth. Jack crouched beside the opening, his eyes wide with wonder and uncertainty. This was it, the heart. This was the place the map had led him to, the place he had been destined to find. He could feel it now, deep in his bones, the sense that this was the key to everything. Without hesitation, Jack reached into the crack, his hand trembling as he touched the source of the light. It was cold, yet somehow warm at the same time, smooth and pulsing with energy. He pulled at it gently, and with a soft, grinding noise, the object came free. It was a small, intricate box, its surface covered in the same symbols Jack had seen everywhere. As he held it in his hands, a wave of understanding washed over him. This was what he had been meant to find. The box, whatever it contained, was the final piece of the puzzle. But as Jack stared at it, the world around him seemed to fade, and he felt a deep, primal connection to the estate, to the land, and to the mystery he had uncovered. This wasn't just about treasure, it was about legacy, about power, and about the responsibility that came with the discovery. Jack knew that whatever lay ahead, it would change everything, and there was no going back. As Jack held the small, intricately carved box in his hands, he could feel the weight of its significance. The world around him seemed to fall silent, the forest, the trees, even Duke, all fading into the background. The only thing that mattered was the box, this final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just an artifact, it was the key to understanding everything that had happened in this place, everything that had led him here. He glanced down at Duke, whose amber eyes were locked on the box with a strange intensity, as if the dog could sense its power as well. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the air thicken with energy, and slowly began to undo the clasps on the box. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to uncover. As the box opened, a soft, radiant glow spilled from the inside, casting long, thin shadows across the stone circle. Jack peered inside, his heart racing with anticipation. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Inside the box, nestled among ancient cloth, was a set of delicate keys, 3 in total. Each key was different, though all were intricately designed with the same symbols that had appeared on the stone circle, the journal, and the map. The keys seemed to hum with an energy of their own, almost as if they were alive. Jack picked up the first one, studying it closely. It was made of a silver-like material that gleamed in the dim light. The symbol on its head was the same as the one Jack had seen etched into the chapel stones, an ancient pattern that seemed to connect everything. He could feel the key vibrating slightly in his hand, as if it were calling out to him. He put the first key back into the box and picked up the second. This one was made of a dark, almost obsidian-like material, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. It had a different symbol, but Jack felt the same pull toward it, the same sense of destiny. The final key was the smallest of the 3, a golden key that shimmered faintly with a light that seemed to come from within. Jack held it up to the light, wondering what it opened. The moment his fingers brushed the golden key, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him. It was like a flood of information, a deep connection to something ancient, something that had been hidden away for centuries. His vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, Jack found himself standing not in the clearing, but in a different place, somewhere deep beneath the earth. He was in a vast chamber, the walls lined with more of the same stone as the chapel. The chamber was filled with an eerie glow, and Jack could feel the presence of someone, watching him. The air was cool, and the smell of earth and stone filled his lungs. As he moved deeper into the chamber, Jack saw the silhouette of a figure standing in the distance. It was a person, but their face was obscured by a dark hood. The figure turned, and Jack felt an overwhelming sense of recognition, though he couldn't place why. The figure raised a hand, motioning for Jack to approach. As he did, the figure spoke, their voice low and resonant, like the echo of the earth itself. "You are the one," the figure said, "the one chosen to protect the legacy." Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but his mouth felt dry, and the words wouldn't come. The figure stepped forward, and the light from their form grew brighter. "The keys," they said. "You must use them to unlock the chambers of the past. Only then will the truth be revealed." Jack's mind raced. What was this place? Who was this figure? And what did they mean by the truth? The figure lowered their hand, and the light dimmed slightly. "There are 3 keys for 3 chambers," they explained. "Each will unlock a different part of the story, a different part of the legacy. But be warned, for the knowledge you seek will come with a price." With that, the figure stepped back into the shadows, their form dissolving into the darkness. Jack reached out, but the vision faded, and he was back in the clearing, holding the 3 keys in his hand. He blinked, his pulse still racing. Had that been real? Or was it just another vision, another piece of the mystery that had brought him here? His thoughts were interrupted by a low growl from Duke, who was standing at his side, alert and tense. Jack turned to look at the dog, who was staring into the woods, his hackles raised. There was something in the air now, something heavy with anticipation. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. Whatever had just happened, whatever he had just seen, was only the beginning. He looked down at the keys again, feeling their weight in his palm. The path ahead was clear, but the journey would not be easy. There were chambers to unlock, secrets to uncover, and a legacy to protect. And Jack knew that the cost of this knowledge would be higher than anything he had ever imagined. The silence of the clearing was broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Jack stood motionless, the 3 keys resting in his hand, each one heavy with significance. Duke, ever vigilant, had already turned his attention back to the woods, his body tense and alert. Jack could feel it too. Something was shifting, something unseen was waiting just beyond the trees, in the shadow of the mountain. The strange vision had faded, but its presence lingered. The figure in the darkness, the cryptic words about protecting a legacy, those words still echoed in his mind. He knew, without a doubt, that he was at the edge of something monumental. It wasn't just about treasure or ancient artifacts anymore. This was about a secret, something so powerful that it had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for the right person to uncover it. And Jack, for reasons he didn't fully understand, was that person. He knew what he had to do next, but it wasn't going to be easy. The keys were meant for something, a purpose that had been carved into the very earth of this place. The journal had mentioned the 3 chambers, and the vision had confirmed it. There were secrets hidden in the mountain, and they were waiting to be unlocked. But the price, the figure had warned him, was something he couldn't yet comprehend. Jack turned to Duke, meeting his dog's gaze. It was as if the two of them had already made an unspoken agreement. There was no turning back now. They would face whatever came next together. He looked around one last time at the clearing, then started walking toward the woods, the path ahead unclear, but the destination undeniable. The further they walked into the woods, the more the air seemed to hum with energy, as if the earth itself was alive, reacting to his every step. The map had led him this far, but now he would have to rely on his instincts, on the pull of the keys, to guide him to the first chamber. Duke led the way, his nose low to the ground, his movements purposeful. Jack could feel the shift in the air as they neared the base of the mountain. The forest opened up in front of them, revealing a massive stone formation, unlike anything Jack had seen before. It was an ancient, crumbling archway carved into the rock itself, as if it had been there for centuries, waiting to be discovered. The symbols etched into the stone were the same ones from the journal, from the map, from the keys. Jack's heart raced as he approached the archway. This was it, the first chamber. He reached for the keys in his pocket, his fingers brushing against the cool metal. The moment he touched them, a low rumble echoed through the earth, a vibration that seemed to come from deep within the mountain. The archway before him shifted, the stone groaning as if it had been moved for the first time in centuries. Slowly, the entrance began to open, revealing a dark passageway leading deep into the heart of the mountain. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the door creaked open. The smell of ancient earth and cold stone filled the air, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Duke growled softly, sensing the tension, but Jack motioned for him to stay close. They stepped into the passageway, and the world outside faded away. The only sounds now were the echoes of their footsteps on the stone floor. The passage stretched out before them, winding and narrow, with walls that seemed to pulse with the same energy that had emanated from the crystal and the stone circle. Jack could feel it now, the hum of something alive, something ancient, buried beneath the earth. The walls were adorned with carvings, not unlike the ones in the journal, but these were more detailed, more intricate. They depicted scenes of ancient ceremonies, of figures bowing before a great force. Jack couldn't make sense of all of it, but he understood one thing. This place was sacred. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until Jack could barely see the path in front of him. The faint glow of the keys illuminated the way, but the air grew thick with an oppressive silence. The only sounds were the occasional drip of water from the ceiling and the distant echo of something moving deep within the mountain. Finally, they reached a small chamber. It was empty, except for a pedestal in the center. The pedestal was carved from stone, the surface worn smooth by centuries of touch. And on the pedestal, there was a small, ancient book, its pages yellowed with age. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he approached it. This was the first part of the legacy, the first key to understanding what had been hidden here for so long. He reached for the book, his fingers brushing the cover. The moment he touched it, the ground beneath him trembled again, the air charged with electricity. The book opened, its pages fluttering, as if reacting to his presence. The symbols in the book matched the ones from the chamber, from the keys, from everything Jack had discovered so far. This was it, the heart of the legacy. He was standing on the threshold of something greater than he could have ever imagined. As he flipped through the pages, the words began to come together, forming a story of an ancient civilization that had protected something of immense power. The pages spoke of the earth itself, of its hidden energy, and of the guardians who had been chosen to protect it. Jack understood now that his role was not just to uncover the truth, but to ensure that this power did not fall into the wrong hands. He had been chosen, just as the journal had said. The legacy had been passed down through the ages, waiting for the right person to unlock it. And now, that person was him. Jack closed the ancient book, his mind racing with the revelations that had just unfolded. The pages had told a story of guardianship and power, of forces far greater than any treasure he had ever imagined. This was no ordinary legacy. It was a legacy tied to the very heart of the earth itself, a force that had been protected for centuries, and now, Jack was the one entrusted with its preservation. As he stood in the dim light of the chamber, the weight of the responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't just here to uncover secrets anymore. He was here to protect something that could change the course of history, and that knowledge brought both fear and resolve. The chamber around him was silent, but Jack could feel the presence of the past all around him, as if the guardians who had protected this power were still watching, waiting for him to make the right choice. Duke stood by his side, his eyes focused on Jack, as though the dog, too, understood the gravity of the moment. Jack took a deep breath, turning the pages of the book once more, searching for answers, for the next step in his journey. There, on the last page, was a drawing of the stone circle he had encountered earlier. The image was detailed, the same carvings and symbols that had been etched into the stones in the clearing. But there was something more. In the center of the circle, there was a marking that Jack hadn't seen before, a square with lines extending from each corner, forming a kind of cross. Above it, in the same script as the rest of the journal, were the words, "The final key." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The final key. It wasn't a physical object like the 3 keys he had found. It wasn't something he could hold in his hand. No, it was something deeper, something more intangible, perhaps a choice, a moment that would determine the fate of this power. He could feel it now, deep inside. This wasn't just about unlocking chambers or finding treasure. This was about understanding the power within himself, the connection between the earth, the legacy, and the choices he would make moving forward. Jack stood there for a long moment, considering the weight of what he had discovered. The path ahead was uncertain, but there was no turning back. He had already unlocked so much, but the final piece, what it was, how it would be unlocked, remained a mystery. He felt the pull, though. The energy that had guided him this far was still alive in the air, vibrating with the promise of something greater, something that lay just beyond his understanding. With a quiet resolve, Jack closed the book and tucked it under his arm. He stood up straight, taking one last look around the chamber. The stone walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and Jack knew that he wasn't alone here, that the spirits of those who had guarded this power were still present, watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. He turned back toward the entrance of the chamber, Duke following close behind. The path was unclear, but the direction was not. The final key wasn't in the chamber. It wasn't a physical object at all. It was a test of his character, of his will to protect this power and keep it from falling into the wrong hands. He had to be prepared, not just to uncover the next secret, but to make the hard choices that would define his destiny. As he exited the chamber, the air seemed to grow colder, and the trees around him whispered in the wind. It was as though the mountain itself was alive, guiding him, and yet, there was a sense of urgency now, a feeling that time was running out. The last key had been found, and Jack knew the next step in his journey would be the most difficult. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew that his life had been changed forever. As the night deepened, Jack and Duke made their way back to the estate. The wind picked up, carrying with it a sense of something ancient and untold. The mountain had revealed its secrets to him, but there was still much to uncover, much to understand. The power was real, and now, it was Jack's responsibility to protect it. He couldn't let it slip away, not after everything he had gone through to find it. The final key was not a physical lock. It was a choice that would determine the future of everything he had discovered. And as the moon rose, high above the mountain, Jack knew he was ready. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it head on, with the keys to the past in his hand and the fate of the future resting on his shoulders. As Jack and Duke made their way back to the estate, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. The weight of the discovery was heavy on Jack's shoulders, but it was also a source of clarity. He had the keys, the journal, and now, the knowledge of what lay ahead. He had uncovered the hidden legacy, but what did it mean? What was he supposed to do with this power? The vision of the cloaked figure had spoken of protecting the legacy, but it was still unclear what that meant or how it would change Jack's life. As the night deepened, Jack could feel the world around him shifting, almost as if it was reacting to the energy that had been awakened in the chambers beneath the mountain. The trees seemed to sway in rhythm with his thoughts, the wind whispering through the leaves, as if encouraging him to keep moving forward. Duke, as always, was alert, his keen instincts guiding them. Jack couldn't help but wonder what the final test would be. The journey had led him to the heart of the mountain, to the ancient power that had been hidden for so long. But what was the cost? What did he have to sacrifice to keep it safe? The estate was quiet when they returned, the house dark except for the faint glow of the moon. Jack felt a strange sense of calm settle over him as he approached the door, but it was a calm mixed with the knowledge that everything had changed. The keys had unlocked something far beyond what he had expected. It wasn't just a matter of uncovering a treasure. It was about understanding the responsibilities that came with it. Inside the house, Jack set the book on the table and sat down, feeling the weight of the journey pressing on him. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow across the room, but the flickering light only added to the sense of unease that Jack couldn't shake. He had found the truth, but the truth was complicated. The legacy wasn't just about protecting a physical object. It was about guarding the earth itself, the power that lay hidden beneath its surface. The vision had been clear about that. But how could Jack protect something so vast, something so powerful, without losing himself in the process? He looked at Duke, who was lying by the fire, his eyes half closed but still alert. The dog had been with him through everything, and Jack knew that he wasn't alone in this. Whatever the final test was, Duke would be there by his side. Jack's mind drifted back to the journal and the final key. The symbols, the map, the carvings in the stone, they were all leading him to one conclusion. He had been chosen. But chosen for what? To protect the power? Yes, but also to wield it. He wasn't just a guardian. He was part of a greater purpose, one that had been set in motion long before he ever arrived at the estate. The question was, could he live up to that purpose? Could he protect the earth's power without becoming consumed by it? The room was silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. Jack closed his eyes and took a deep breath, steadying himself. He knew what he had to do. The next step was clear. He had to return to the stone circle, the place where it all began, and use the keys to unlock the final chamber. But this time, it wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about facing whatever awaited him there, whatever challenge the legacy had in store. He opened his eyes and looked at the keys resting on the table. The first was silver, the second obsidian, and the third, golden. Each one represented a part of the journey, a piece of the puzzle that Jack had been putting together. But the final key, the one that would unlock the ultimate chamber, was within him. It wasn't something he could hold or touch. It was a decision, a choice he had to make. Jack stood up, feeling the firelight warm his face, and made his way to the door. Duke followed closely behind, and together, they stepped into the night. The estate was quiet, but Jack could feel the earth beneath him humming with energy, guiding him back to the stone circle. The path seemed clearer now, as if the land itself was leading him forward. As they walked, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the final test was near, that he was about to face the most important moment of his life. But he was ready. Whatever it took, he would face it head-on. The journey had prepared him for this moment. The forest around him seemed to grow quieter as they neared the clearing, the trees standing like silent sentinels, watching as he approached. Jack paused at the edge of the stone circle, taking a deep breath before stepping into the center. He felt the weight of the keys in his pocket, the knowledge of the past and the future all resting on his shoulders. The energy in the air was palpable, and Jack could feel it stirring, as if the earth itself was waiting for him to make the next move. He pulled the keys from his pocket, one by one, and placed them on the stone pedestal. As he did, the ground beneath him trembled, and the stones in the circle began to glow with the same radiant energy he had felt before. The final key was not a physical object, but a choice, a decision he had to make, not just for himself, but for the future of the earth and the power that lay within it. Jack took a step forward, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The moment Jack stepped forward, the ground beneath him seemed to pulse with life. The 3 keys lay on the stone pedestal, glowing with an intensity that made the air shimmer around him. The entire clearing seemed to hold its breath as if nature itself was waiting for him to make the final move. Jack's heart raced, his hands still gripping the keys. But it wasn't the keys that held the power now. It was the decision he had to make. He glanced down at the glowing symbols carved into the stones around him, recognizing the familiar markings from the journal, the map, and the ancient visions. The energy in the air grew heavier, almost suffocating, as though the weight of all the history, all the guardians, and all the secrets of the estate were converging here, in this moment. Duke stood by Jack's side, his eyes watching the glowing stones with a sense of caution, but also a quiet understanding. Jack knew that whatever happened next, his loyal companion would be there with him, just as he had been through every challenge before. The soft hum of energy in the air intensified as Jack raised his hand, feeling the power coursing through him. The 3 keys glowed even brighter, casting long, flickering shadows across the stone circle. For a moment, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of clarity, as if everything had fallen into place. He had spent so long searching for meaning, for purpose, and now, standing here at the heart of it all, he realized that the purpose was never to simply find the treasure. It was to protect it, to guard this power, to ensure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. But the true test, the final key, was not about defeating an enemy or solving a puzzle. It was about choice, his choice. The figure in the vision had told him that the legacy was his to protect. But what did that mean? How could one person be entrusted with such a monumental responsibility? Jack knew that the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about treasure. This was about the balance of the earth, the power that had been buried here for centuries, and the consequences of allowing it to fall into chaos. Jack's mind flashed back to everything he had learned about the guardians, the protectors, the symbols, the vision in the chamber beneath the mountain. It was all connected. He was part of something bigger, something that transcended time, and now, he was the one who had to carry the burden of that knowledge. But he also knew he couldn't do it alone. The journal had mentioned the guardians, the ones who had come before him. But what about the ones who would come after? What kind of legacy would he leave? The questions swirled in his mind, but there was no time for doubt now. He had made it this far. He had unlocked the power, and now it was time to decide what to do with it. Slowly, Jack placed his hand over the first key, the silver one, and he felt a rush of energy flood his body. The world seemed to shift around him, the stone walls of the circle vibrating with the force of the energy. He could see it now. This was the key to the past, to understanding the origins of the legacy, to the protectors who had hidden this power long ago. It was a symbol of strength, of guardianship. Jack withdrew his hand, and the energy subsided, but the feeling remained, lingering in the air. The second key, the obsidian one, seemed to hum with a different energy, darker, more mysterious. Jack knew that this key was the key to the future, to the path ahead, to the consequences of his choices. It was a key that would bind him to the responsibility of guarding the legacy. As his fingers touched the obsidian key, he felt a sudden coldness grip him, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of destiny, the realization that this power was not his to keep. It was his to protect, to guard, to ensure that it would never be misused. Jack took a deep breath and placed the final key, the golden one, in its place. This was the key to the present, to the moment that would shape everything. The golden key shimmered with light, a brilliance that filled the entire clearing. Jack felt his heart steady as the energy surged around him, this time warm and comforting, as if the earth itself was reassuring him. He was ready. With all 3 keys in place, the pedestal began to glow brighter, the symbols on the stones pulsing in time with the energy. Jack stepped back, watching as the power he had unleashed swirled around him. The stone circle began to shift, the earth beneath him trembling. The energy built to a crescendo, and then, with a sudden crack, the ground split open before him, revealing a hidden passage leading deep into the mountain. Jack took a step forward, Duke following close behind, and together they descended into the depths. What lay ahead was uncertain, but Jack knew that this was the next step in the journey. The legacy had been protected for centuries, and now, it was his turn to safeguard it for the future. The path was clear, but the responsibility was immense. Jack knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. He had made his choice. The Earth's power would be protected, and he would ensure that it would never be lost again. As Jack descended into the dark passageway, the air grew colder, and the faint glow from the keys flickered behind him, illuminating the narrow path ahead. The earth beneath his feet was damp, the smell of ancient stone, and the heavy weight of the mountain surrounding him. The walls of the passage were smooth but covered in markings, much like the ones he had seen in the journal. They seemed to tell a story, stories of guardians, of those who had come before him, who had protected this power, this legacy, with their very lives. The passage twisted and turned, narrowing as it went deeper into the mountain, and Jack's pulse quickened. Each step he took felt like he was moving closer to something monumental, but the sense of anticipation was mixed with a deep, unshakable feeling of responsibility. Duke walked at his side, his movements silent, but his body tense, as if he too could feel the weight of what lay ahead. The deeper they went, the more Jack felt the pull of the past, the presence of the guardians who had once protected this legacy. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that he was not alone in these tunnels, even though the passage was empty. As they rounded a corner, the passage opened up into a massive chamber. The walls were lined with shelves and alcoves, filled with objects that looked ancient, some covered in dust, others glowing with an eerie light. The chamber was circular, its center dominated by a large stone structure. Jack stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The walls were covered with more of the strange symbols, and in the center, at the base of the stone structure, was an altar. The altar was made of the same stone as the chamber, but it was adorned with intricate carvings, ones that Jack recognized from the journal. This was it, the heart of the legacy. This was the place where everything had begun, where the guardians had once stood, protecting the power that now rested in Jack's hands. As he approached the altar, Jack could feel the energy in the room intensify. It was as if the very air was alive with power, a force that had been waiting for him to arrive. He took a deep breath and stepped up to the altar, placing the 3 keys down in front of him. The moment they touched the surface, the ground beneath him trembled, and the walls of the chamber seemed to pulse with life. Jack could feel it now, the weight of the decision before him. The keys had unlocked the past, the present, and the future, but it was up to him to protect this power, to keep it safe from those who would seek to misuse it. As he stood there, the soft hum of energy growing louder, Jack knew that this was the final test. The chamber, the altar, the keys, they were all part of something much bigger than he could fully comprehend. He had been chosen to protect this legacy, but it was more than that. He had to decide what to do with the power now that he had it. The choice was his. Would he keep it hidden, as it had been for so many years, or would he share it with the world? Could he trust others with such power, or would it corrupt them? These questions swirled in his mind, but Jack knew that there was no simple answer. As the light from the keys began to intensify, Jack stepped back, taking a moment to think. The decision wasn't about what was easiest, it was about what was right. He couldn't keep this power to himself. He had to protect it, but he also had to make sure it was used for good, that it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. The vision of the cloaked figure, the guardians of the past, they had all warned him about the cost of this power. And Jack understood now. The cost was not just in guarding the legacy, but in knowing when to let it go, when to pass it on to others who could protect it after him. Jack closed his eyes, the hum of energy still vibrating through the chamber. He could feel it now. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment that would define his life and the future of the power he had uncovered. With a deep breath, he reached out and touched the altar. As his fingers brushed the cold stone, the energy surged around him, and he knew, without a doubt, that he was ready to make the choice. The ground beneath him trembled once again, the stones shifting and groaning, as if acknowledging the decision he had made. Jack stood there, feeling the weight of the legacy settle on his shoulders, and he realized that this was only the beginning. The world would change, but he would be the one to ensure it. Change for the better. He had chosen to protect the legacy, but he had also chosen to share it, to pass on the responsibility to others who would protect it long after he was gone. With the hum of energy still vibrating in the air, Jack took one final look at the chamber. This was where it all started, and it was where it would end. The power would be safe, and he would make sure of it. Together with Duke, Jack turned and walked away from the altar, knowing that his journey was far from over. He had made the choice. Now, It was time to ensure the future of the legacy he had sworn to protect. As Jack and Duke made their way back from the heart of the mountain, the weight of the journey seemed to lift slightly. The decision had been made, and the power that had lain dormant for centuries now rested in his hands, not to possess, but to protect. The estate, once a mystery filled with ancient secrets, had become more than just a place to live. It was the foundation of something greater. Jack could feel the land beneath his feet, alive and pulsing with energy. The journey had started with the simple goal of finding peace, but it had transformed into something much more. It had become a purpose, a mission that would not only define his life, but also the legacy of the earth itself. As they neared the estate, the familiar sight of the old stone house seemed almost comforting now, though Jack knew the true work was just beginning. The estate would need to be rebuilt, but more importantly, the secrets it held would need to be shared, protected, and passed on. The power Jack had unlocked was not for one person to hold alone. It was meant to be a part of a greater whole, a responsibility that would extend beyond his time. Jack couldn't do it all on his own. He had always known that, but now, he understood it more than ever. He would need to find others who could help him guard the legacy, who could carry the torch when the time came. The fire that had burned so brightly in him during the discovery of the estate was still there, but it had tempered, shifted. Now, it was a steady flame, one that would guide him in the years to come. As he looked at Duke, who was walking beside him, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This journey had been difficult, but with his loyal companion by his side, it had been possible. Duke had always been more than just a dog. He had been Jack's protector, his guide, and in some ways, his mirror. The bond between them was unbreakable, and Jack knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The estate loomed in front of them as they crossed the threshold, the familiar scent of pine and wood filling the air. Inside, the house was quiet, but it was a comforting silence. The hearth was empty, but Jack could almost hear the crackling of the fire in the distance, the warmth that had once filled the space now a memory. He set the journal and the 3 keys down on the table, his fingers lingering on the leather cover for a moment longer than necessary. The keys had unlocked the past, and they had led him here, but it was time for him to make the next move. It was time to build, to create a future that honored what had been uncovered. The responsibility was his, but it was not a burden, it was a gift. The gift of knowledge, of understanding, and of power. He had the tools to protect this legacy, and he knew how to use them. The world had changed, and so had he. The legacy of the estate was no longer something to be hidden away. It was meant to be shared, to be safeguarded by those who understood its true meaning. Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the earth beneath him, the pulse of the mountain, and the rhythm of the world around him. It was as if the land itself had acknowledged him, as if the guardians of the past had accepted him as one of their own. But that acceptance came with responsibility. It was not a responsibility he could carry alone, and he knew that. The first step was finding others, people who shared his understanding, who could help him protect this power and guide it toward the future. He had already begun to see glimpses of what that future might look like, and it was one filled with potential. But first, Jack had to rebuild. The estate needed care, and so did the legacy it held. Jack knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges. There would be those who sought to take the power for themselves. But Jack was no longer the man who had come to this place looking for peace. He was a guardian now, a protector of something much greater than himself. And he would do whatever it took to ensure that this power remained safe, that it would not fall into the wrong hands. As Jack stood in the doorway, looking out at the mountain, he could feel the weight of the years ahead. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it had just begun. The legacy of the estate was not just about the treasures hidden in the earth. It was about what they meant, about the power they held to shape the future. Jack had been chosen to protect it, but he had also been chosen to share it, to guide it toward a better future. And with Duke at his side, Jack knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. In this compelling journey, Jack, a former soldier, embarks on a life-changing adventure after purchasing a mysterious mountain estate. His story is one of discovery, responsibility, and guarding a powerful legacy hidden for centuries. As he uncovers ancient artifacts and hidden chambers, Jack learns that he is not just a passive bystander, but the chosen protector of a force much greater than he could have ever imagined. With the help of his loyal dog Duke, Jack uncovers the true meaning of his role, unraveling secrets that bind the past, present, and future together. This unique tale of a veteran's journey into the unknown will captivate those who love veteran stories filled with mystery, adventure, and purpose. As the mystery unfolds, Jack must make life-altering decisions that not only affect his future but the future of the world around him. From deciphering cryptic symbols to confronting ancient powers, this is a thrilling addition to veteran stories that highlight courage, duty, and the powerful bond between man and dog. As Jack faces the consequences of unlocking such immense power, he learns that the true test is not just about the treasure. It's about ensuring that the legacy of the past is protected for future generations. Veteran stories like these remind us that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on the battlefield, but in the heart, as Jack and his companion face their greatest challenge yet.